Hello, good morning all. If you can hear me, drop audio on the chat.
Yeah, good, sir.
All right, just give a couple of minutes to accommodate those that might be having connection issues. We'll start in a bit, just about 5 minutes or thereabouts.
All right, good morning. My name is Don Dio, and I'll be taking money market review. Please, if you can hear me, simply send a message that you can hear me. All right, thank you very much. All right, thank you. Okay, so we'll start off our analysis by looking at the calendar, the fundamental news. I want to be sure of what we have for today. So I'll be sharing my screen now. Please indicate if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen? Just send yes. Just type yes. All right, thank you very much. All right. So if you look at the calendar for today, you notice that we have a lot of high impact news for this particular week. Let me quickly I'm looking at the forest factory. Now, for today being Tuesday, we have a high impact news later on in the day, the United States dollar. That is core retail sales and the retail sales. Now, these are major news events that can affect the cost of our trading. So we are looking at around 1:30. That is when these major news events will be released. Now, personally, when I'm doing my analysis, I prefer to use this website for a brief overview of what the fundamentals hold. So quickly, we'll be looking at I'll be sharing the screen now. We'll be seeing all right, so these are the numbers that we have. These are the fundamental. Now, this particular website is called Trading Economics. So this is one of the websites I consult whenever there's a fundamental event for the day to see what is obtainable. So quickly, if we look at the retail sales for the news we are about to expect, you notice that the consensus, which is what we call the forecast, is meant to be 0.4%. What that simply tells us is that there's a high tendency that the news that is going to come out on the United States dollar be positive. If that is the case, then there's a high tendency that the United States dollar will appreciate in value. Now, there are some other metrics that makes that possible. Now, this is just what we have for today on the news calendar, majorly the retail sales. And this is what it entails. What it does is it actually measuring some goods, retail goods and services for a period of time. Actually, there are about 13 major types of retail goods that is being measured. What we are looking at is if the prices are increased, if the numbers comes out positive, then it's going to affect the dollar in a positive manner. So this is it. Fundamentals. So whenever we are doing our analysis, it's best to always check the fundamentals to see what is happening for that day. Now, let's now quickly go into the technical analysis. I'll be sharing my screen now. Now, if you can see my screen, just indicate. All right, can you see my chart? Can you see my chart? All right, thank you very much. All right, so the first thing we want to look at on the fundamental level is what we refer to as the dollar index. We want to look at how the dollar index has been moving. So my chart is the chart of D1. This is D1. Now, D1 simply meaning that we are looking at the market on a daily basis. So the demarcations you're seeing here is a monthly demarcation market. So currently, you notice that the dollar index has been on a steady uprise, has been moving up, bullish trend. Now, for this month of August, you also can see that the market has been bullish for quite a while. Look at the movement to the upside. So this tells us that if the dollar index is bullish, then the currencies that are paired with the United States dollar, especially if the dollar is the base, we begin to appreciate in value. All right, so the currencies that is recorded as the base in the currency pair, we appreciate in value. Now you notice something looking at this particular chart. Notice that the market has gotten to a level or a region where we can term a region of resistance. So I will be marking out this region. So look at this particular space, this region. So this can be tried as a resistance zone. So whenever the market hits such a zone, what we are expecting is that there's likely going to be retracement. So even though the dollar is currently very bullish, it has overextended, it has extended itself almost beyond the previous month's high price. What you see here is the high price from last month. The high price, which is the highest price coming in from last month. So what we are expecting on the dollar index is a retracement maybe at this particular moment. So we should be expecting something like a push up and then possible a push downside. So on the dollar index, this is what I'm expecting to see, which means at the interim, we should still see more bullish move in the United States dollar, where I am expecting it to move above the high of the previous month, which is the black line that you see drawn on the chart. All right. So the black line you see on the chart is the high price coming from last month. So the dollar has a tendency to push above. So if the retail sales that is coming out today, that will be dropping today, is positive, then there's a tendency that we will see the dollar appreciate above the previous month's high. But if that news turns out to be negative, then there's likely going to be a drop on the dollar index downside. This is my bias on the dollar. All right, so now if we drop down to the H4 on the dollar index, we can now begin to see how the market is playing out gradually. So you notice that on the dollar index, we now have the market at that region where we term as our resistance. Now from this region, there's a tendency that we will collapse to the bottom. And if we are dropping, how far may we go? Can go as low as this particular region. So you can see the region I marked on the chart. Let me make it. Most likely we will drop down to this green region area, because this area can be termed as a major support market as of today. This is what I am currently seeing on the dollar index. Now, if we now move to the Euro USD, so on the US dollar, we are expecting a rally to the upside and for the interim. And that's because if you look closely at the chart, you notice that the dollar has been in an upward trend. So it has been in a bullish trend for quite some time. And there's a high tendency that this bullishness of the dollar will continue, because fundamentally, there are some fundamentals that support the movement to the upside that we are currently seeing. So once we break through above this month's high, last month's high, then that is when we now start considering a bullish movement or a bearish movement dollar. Now, if you move all the way to the euro, notice that the euro has been on a decline for quite some time. And if you notice closely, you also see that for the past few weeks, this is H4. I'm currently on H4 now. Notice the movement to the downside has been sustained. See the market form lower lows. The market is going down and is forming lower lows. At the same time, it is forming lower highs, which is a sign that we're actually a confirmed downtrend. So we have moved all the way down. So usually what I normally do, or what I will be doing, is to get how far we can go to the bottom or how far we can go to the downside. And I will be using a Fibonacci to trace the move up. So you can see that we have moved from the Fibonacci. My Fib was drawn from this high, the current movement to the upside. which is from this bottom where you are seeing my cursor, all the way up to high, which you are seeing currently on my cursor. This was the previous move to the upside. You notice that we have moved almost beyond the areas where we would have expected a retracement to occur. So it has moved beyond or below the areas where we would have expected that the market is in a retracement. So at this stage, I can conclude that Euro USD is almost in a reversal move. Which means on this movement up, there's a tendency for the market to reverse. So if we are reversing to the downside, how low can we go from this point? Now, if you look closely, you notice this particular region is a region of support. So this is a support region that we have seen in the market on Euro USD. So you also notice that the market has dipped into this. So you see the drop into this particular region on the H4. And then there's a move, a push upside. So for us to completely be bearish on the Euro USD, we want to see the market break below this major resistance, or sorry, this major support at this zone, which is the green levels that you're seeing in the chart. Now, but at the interim, we are seeing a movement to the upside. So what you're seeing is a mix, this week's activity. So for this week, this is all the market, the Euro USD has done. It has pushed down almost into the support region, and then we see a push upside. So if we are selling the Euro USD, where might we most likely be entering our sell in? Using my feed again, I want to measure to get how far we can retrace on this particular move. So if I draw my feed from that point all the way up, all the way down to this region, our support, and decide to use this as our support. So I'll be expecting a retracement on Euro USD all the way up to around this particular region. So I'm expecting a retracement all the way up to this particular region, which is this area. Now, at this point, I will be expecting, I'll be waiting for a sell opportunity. So what that simply means is that I can decide at the interim to buy up to this region in hopes of selling from that region to the downside. So, but in a long run, if you look at the trend, for those of us that are intraday or scalpers, we might want to maybe possibly buy up to that area or buy up above 50. Now, if you notice this movement to the bottom, which is from this high all the way down to this point, there's a midpoint. The midpoint is the 50 mark that you see on the field. So there's a high tendency that the currency might possibly trade all the way up to that region or dropping down. Remember, that where we are currently, where we have pushed away from is a support, a major support in the market, which is this dark region, this dark area that you are seeing on the chart. All right, someone is saying he cannot hear me. Please, others in the meeting, can you hear me? Am I being heard? Please just type a yes. All right, thank you very much. Audio, all right, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. All right. So looking closely at what we are discussing now, you notice that we have just pushed out of this support area, which means whenever the market hits a support, I have just seen now, there's a tendency for a move to the upside. Now that move to the upside doesn't necessarily mean that the market is reversing. That move will just be a retracement. And what we normally use is the Fib. Use the Fibonacci to measure the extent to which the retracement can occur. So I have just used the Fib now. Based from the high of last week, this is last week's high price, all the way down to the current low of this week. And what I am now expecting is a retracement all the way up to above 50% of the last movement. So for me to take a sell on this trade, I will be more sure of a sell if the market moves all the way up to around this region of around 50%. So, but at the interim, for those of us that we want to scalp, it is possible that we might scalp, which is a buy. We might decide to buy from where we are currently all the way up that particular region. Now, take note that we are looking at H4. So this is on a weekly basis. From this point, we will drop down to the lower time frame, and then we'll see if in an intraday basis, whether there's a trade we can take, either buy or sell within the day. Now, the analysis you have just seen is a longer term, which is maybe for the week, how far I am expecting the USD to, and this is how low it might come. At this point now, I'll be dropping down to the H1, which is the time frame, the H1 time frame. Now, so you notice that on the H1 for today, we have pushed all the way back up. You can see the movement to the upside. And now this is last week's. Let me remove this. So this level you see here is the high price from yesterday. This is yesterday's high price, and yesterday's low price. So what we normally experience in the market is that whenever the market is moving, there's a tendency for the market to gravitate towards the high price or the low price of the previous day. So you notice that as the market moves per day, each of these days, it usually will move towards either the high price of the previous day or towards the low price of the previous day. But for now, looking at the chart, you can see that there's a gravitation towards the high price of yesterday. And if that happens, then it means that there's a tendency for Euro USD to push above the high price of yesterday. And this here is the high price of yesterday, which means if it moves above this high price of yesterday, then we will get a very good entry or a very good reason to sell where we are currently. So if we measure from where we are to this particular distance, which is a high price of yesterday, that gives us about 38 pips. So from the current market price to the high price of yesterday is about 38 pips. And on average, Euro USD can move around 74 pips per day. So in a day, it can move 74 pips, which means there's a very high tendency that it will move above this high point and then get into the region or the area where we are expecting to sell from. But for those of us who might want to scalp, some persons might be like, it's too long, or that place is too far. No, within few minutes of a movement, Euro USD is most likely, it can get up to that point because it's not too far. So some persons might want to buy all the way up there. Yes, it is possible to buy all the way up to this region. But looking at the fact that the market is a downtrend, much more better not ourselves to sell on Euro USD, especially when it gets to that particular region. Now, for those who want to scalp the market up to that point, I would suggest that you go in with a very little, small lot size and ensure that your risk management is intact. So for Euro USD, I am currently looking at a region within this space. So I will be looking at an entry within this particular region at around 1.09700 and 1.1100. So I am looking at an entry, a buy and a sell trade rather I'm looking at a sell trade at around this particular region that is shaded. Let me quickly shade. So I'm looking at a sell entry from this area between 1.100 and 1.09750. So if the Euro USD get up to this area, then I will be looking for a sell. But what if it doesn't get all the way up to this region? Where else can I sell? So for those of us that want to trade maybe on a longer term, then you want to wait for Euro USD to get up there. But if it doesn't get up there, then where else can I be taking a sell? So a sell trade can also be very possible from around this region, which means for those of us that may not want to wait till it gets up there, there's a possibility that the market can also retrace from where we are currently. But the best bet is to wait for the market to get all the way for take your sell. All right, so that is that on the Euro USD. Yes. So that's that on the Euro USD. So my bias on Euro USD is a bearish movement, because you notice from the US, the dollar index, they are most likely going to above the recent high that we have found on the dollar index. Most likely, I'm seeing a sell on the Euro USD. And the region I'll be considering a sell is where I have just marked on the chart, which is 1.1 thousand and 1.09750. All right. So let's now go to so let's look at pound USD. And then after pound USD, we look at gold. So on pound USD, we would be having almost a similar incident or almost a similar setup as the one we are seeing on Euro USD. So, but looking at pound USD, you notice that we have moved almost below the low price of last month. So notice that, like I said previously, that the market usually gravitates towards the low of the previous day or the high of the previous day, or either the low of the previous month or the high of the previous month. So if you look closely, you can see that we have moved below the low previous month. So this dark line that you see on the charts marks the low price from the previous month. And we can see that we have traded below that low price. Now, where we are currently is actually a region of support, an area where we are expecting the market to begin movement, to the upside. So if the pound breaks below this region, then there's a tendency that we will go down. But for now, this region has proven to be very strong support, which means there's a high tendency for the instrument to appreciate or to move up from this particular support. And we see a lot of rejections to the downside. Look closely, you will see rejections of the weeks downside. These rejections shows us that there's a battle. The market is struggling to continue the movement to the downside. Now, we are looking at the monthly. This is D1. So on the D1, this is what we are seeing, a rejection at this particular support. Now, if we are moving up, so what do we do from this point? Take note that what we are seeing on pound USD is similar to what we have just analyzed on the Euro USD, because these two instruments has more of a positive correlation. So whatever is happening on the Euro USD most likely be replicated on the pound USD. So at this point, I will be expecting a movement at least of last month's movement. So take note that from last month, we have moved beyond what we would have referred to as a retracement. So the movement last month is from this point all the way up to this region. And there was a complete reversal of that move. It means we reversed completely. And which means at this point, there's a high tendency that we might move all the way down from here. So, but before then, we are waiting to see the pound break below this resistance. I mean, this support. If we are able to break below this support, then it means we will lapse from here. And the movement to the downside will largely depend on how the retail sales on the United States dollar turns out. So if it turns out positive, then you will likely see movement to the downside in the pound. But if it turns out negative, then there's a high tendency that we might push to the upside, just as we experience or just as we can see on in the Euro USD. So at the interim, we can conclude that the pound is in a range. So the pound is currently ranging at that particular bottom. All right, someone is raising. So, Ms. Stella, go ahead and have a question. All right, so what we will do is at the end of the session, as we progress, I will take your question. If you have any question, you can send them to the chat. I will see them from there. Send your questions to the chat, and I will be able to reply from. All right, so on pound USD, we are in a range. So currently we are looking at a range bound market. And whenever the market is in this kind of state, it's usually best to observe more closely. Now, this is very much unlike the US dollar, the Euro USD that has pushed away from the support. We are still within the region where we came as a support. All right, so from the chart, I'm seeing USD, I'm seeing US, I'm seeing gold. So we'll look at gold shortly after now. So someone is asking, how can we know if the news comes out positive or negative? Yes, you will know if the news is positive or negative by the numbers that are being released. So you will see it from the data. So for instance, if the news is positive, you will notice that the number that is released will be green. On Forex Factory, it will be shown as green. That's how you know that the news is positive. Now, most of the time, it is not the negative number, or it is not the negative that is shown on the numbers that makes it negative. It is the color. So you are not looking at the minus or the negative sign that is shown on the data that is released. It is the color of the data. So if it is green on your Forex Factory, then it means that that news is positive. Red, then it means it is negative. I hope that is clear. All right, so now let's quickly go to gold. Let's look at gold, see what we have on gold. So give me a few minutes to go down to my gold. All right, so this is gold. So we are currently on gold now. And we are looking at the H4. This is H4 on gold. We are looking at the weekly time frame. So usually I begin my analysis from the higher time frame, which is the D1. Now, the reason I look at the D1 is to know where we are with respect to the previous month. And then we notice that we have this movement to the downside on gold. So currently, like I mentioned earlier, there's a tendency for the market to always gravitate towards either the high of the previous month or the low of the previous month. So currently, we are seeing gold very close to the low of the previous month. And if you look closely to your left on this other day, look at my cursor, on this side, you see a very massive move to the upside. Now, this movement in the market is where the market or the gold will most likely gravitate towards. Now, if you look closely, you will see this massive movement to the upside. This is more like a gap, which the market will usually want to fill. If I place my line on this point and then place this at this particular point, you notice that we have this space, and there's a high tendency for gold to gravitate towards a particular region. If that is the case, then I'll be looking at this area where I'm expecting gold to get to. Now, this can be termed as your support. This can be referred to as very strong support region. So which means what we are seeing currently on gold is a move to the downside. Now, if gold breaks below the low of last month, this is the low of last month. If gold breaks below the low of last month, then there's a high tendency that it will gravitate towards where we are seeing this space or this gap. And if that is the case, then we will have a support at this particular region. So on the H4, which is the daily time frame, if we are looking at H4, it takes us to the weekly movement in the market. So for this week, you can see a strong downtrend in gold. Gold is forming lower lows and lower highs. See how the lows are getting lower and the highs are getting lower on gold. Now, but take note that previously we have moved from this region of resistance, which is up here. We have moved from this area of resistance, and then we are now moving towards an area of support, which is what we are seeing down here. So from what we are seeing on the H4, gold has a long way to go to the downside. There's a high tendency that we might continue going down on gold. Now, where would I possibly take a trade or take an entry on gold? I have dropped down to the H1. This is H1 now. So I'll be waiting for an entry. This instance now, a sell. So I'll most likely take a sell trade on gold. I'm to buy if I'm to place a trade on gold now, I'll be waiting for most likely a reversal to this region. Now take note that the news that is about to drop really do not know the numbers that will be dropping on that particular news. So I will most likely be waiting for a retracement to this region on gold. So I will be more comfortable selling from this particular space, which is here. It hopes that from this region, then we won't move all the way down. This is what I'm expecting to see play out on gold. The market retraces to around this region before we drop down lower. Take note that where we are is an area of support, because we are currently at the previous month's low price. We are just positioned at the low price of last month. And also remember what I said, that the market gravitates towards the low of last month or the low of yesterday, or the high of last month, high of yesterday, of the previous day. So this was the low of the previous day. This area is the low of the previous day. That was the low from yesterday. And we are almost at that region. So there's a tendency that we might break through, fall below to the downside. And if that is the case, then it means that gold has a tendency to continue all the way down. But usually what is best is we normally wait for a retracement in the move to the downside, or then we sell massively from that region. So I'll be expecting a retracement up. But let's go down to a much lower time frame, like the M15. So this is on the M15. And then what are we looking at? This is what we see on M15. We are currently at this particular region. And just like we said, there might not be much movement right now because of the news on the dollar. We are expecting that news to drop at around 130. So we might possibly see that movement drop, or that movement by 130. And this is what I am expecting. And take note that when this news drop, there's usually a zigzag movement, what we call whipsaw, where the market moves up and then sharply moves down. Within that period, there's a tendency that we might see gold push up to the push to the upside before dropping to the downside. So these are my analysis for the currencies we have. We have looked at Euro USD, we have looked at the Pound USD, and so for gold, my entry would most likely for a sell be around this region. A stop loss above this particular space. My stop loss will be above this particular region. This area marked as red. If I'm taking a sell on gold, I will most likely wait for the market to get up to this region before it drops. Some persons might feel that this, from where the market is currently to where I have marked, that the distance is too far. The distance is not too far. Gold can move that much within just few minutes, within few seconds, or within few minutes. Gold has a tendency to move that much. So if you look at it, you might feel that, why not I buy to that region? Take note that we are currently in a downtrend. What we are seeing on gold is a confirmed downtrend. So your best bet of trading and successfully navigating to it to sell. Remember, I normally use trading in the trend as swimming in the flow, swimming when you are swimming and you are swimming in the opposite direction of the flow of the river. Notice that it is going to be very difficult for you to swim because you are swimming against the current of the river. But if you are swimming and your movement is in the direction of the flow of that river, you will see how easy it will be for you to swim through the river. Very smooth, because the current will just carry you. So currently, we are in a downtrend on gold. We have seen this from the monthly that gold is going down. And currently, gold is at the lowest price of last month, which means there's a high tendency for you to continue moving down. So your best bet on gold is there. So it will be counterproductive to be considering a buy, looking at what we have seen so far. So we want to position ourselves for a sell. So this region we have just marked is where I'm anticipating a sell. So even though some persons might look very far, but we know how gold moves. That distance is not too far, not far. The distance that within a few minutes, gold can get there and drop from there. So that is where I'm considering, or I'll be looking at a sell within that particular region. my stop loss above, then my take profit will be targeted at the low of the previous day. That is the low. So if I'm taking a sell from that region, I'll be targeting to enter or to place my take profit below the low yesterday. This point, which we are referring to as the low of yesterday, is acting currently as a resistance. If you look closely, we are just at that particular region, acting as a resistance where we will be expecting the market to push all the way up. So on gold, this is what I am expecting. An entry at this region, the region of 1.1909.64, all the way to 1908.46. You can see the mark, the areas I have marked on the chart, the stop loss above and the take profit at this particular point. All right. All right, any other? Okay, someone that's, okay, I'm seeing US 30 and Euro JPY and the US 100. So I think let's look at US 100 and see what we have on the US 100. Now, if you have any question based on what we have talked about so far, feel free to drop your questions in the message in the chat session, and I will know where to look at your. All right, so let's look at the US 100. All right, so this is US 100. So you notice I have some markings I have done previously on US 100. This is areas where I have actually placed my trades. All right, so let's quickly go to and look at US 100. So on US 100, I am currently looking at the monthly. All right, so please let me remove all these markings I've done. Please give me a few minutes. I am clearing the chart, the markings. All right, so this is what we have. So for today, we are looking at the D1, which is the monthly time frame on US 100. And now notice what has happened. We have broken below the low of last month. So look at it. We are below, we have exceeded the low of last month. And then we also have the high at this particular point. So with what we have seen so far, there's a tendency for US 100 to retrace. So we will look at how far it can retrace. Currently, we are at this level, which we will term as a support. So we are currently at this level, which called a support. And then we see the movement downside. So how far can we go? So what do we see on US 100? Now notice that we are currently in a downtrend on US 100. You can see that from this month alone, we have been moving to the downside. So if let me quickly. All right, so if you look at the trend, we have been moving steadily to the downside. So this is what we have on the US 100. Now, let's now drop down to a much lower time frame. Now, you also notice that on the US 100, we have actually reversed. So from the previous month, this was the previous month, from the high price of the previous month, from the low price of the previous month to the high price of the previous month, we have actually moved in such a way that what we see is a complete reversal of the movement from the previous month. What we want to do now is to see what we have on the lower time frame. I will be dropping down to H4. So on the H4, we have the move. You can see clearly now that we are actually in a downtrend. So what we will be expecting to see on the US 100 is possible continuation to the downside. We will likely see the US 100 continue its movement to the downside. Downside, how low? We want to see the market or the instrument break below this point, so at this point. So the low we are referring to is the low from last week. We want to see the US 100 or the instrument break below. So this is what I'm expecting now. The market breaks down below that particular region. So already we have seen a replacement to the upside, which means for a sell trade, where we are currently is a good position a sell. So I have just dropped down to 15 minutes. So we are currently looking at the first one. This is what we have on the 15 minutes. So like I said, I am expecting a movement, a push to the downside. Take note that we are seeing this particular region. Now look at this particular region of support. Let me give it a different colors. So look at this shaded part, this region of support. Seeing how the market, bounce off of this region severally, and then we are now moving bottom side. So what would I be expecting on the US 100? I will be expecting a sell on the US 100, but preferably, I will want the market to do a kind of retracement to this region. So I would prefer the market to do a kind of retracement to this region before we sell from that. So for those of us that want to sell the US 100 or enter the trade on the US 100, I would rather suggest that you wait for the market to retrace to this particular region. This area is around, this is the price. You can see the price on the chart. I'm using a horizontal line to mark the prices I am considering. So we are already pushed below the price, but I will be expecting a retracement to this area before I sell. My retracement will be to, my selling will start at I'll prefer a retracement to this point. So if US 100 retraces to this area, then I will take a sell at particular point, and then my profit target would be most likely below the low or around this particular region. So my profit target will be in or around this. That is it. US 100. So for US 100, my bias is a sell. I'm expecting the market to continue its movement to the downside. Take note that we have a lot of indices that support the fact that we might likely continue our push to the downside. Because like I said, we are already in a downtrend. And looking at where the market is coming from previous months, see that we are already at the lowest price previous months, which means there's a tendency for us to break below that low and continue the movement to the downside. So, but for me to be entering this trade now, I will wait for a retracement to this region or I sell from there. All right, so that is my analysis for US 100. All right, so at this point, I want to take your questions. Ask someone. So I'm going through the comments, and someone is saying, how can we know English? So I have answered that. So S30, we have talked about gold. Now, for the guy who is asking for gold, for the person asking for gold, we have talked about gold, and I mentioned what I am currently looking at on gold. This is what I expect to see on gold. So for gold, I am expecting a retracement. I mentioned that we are expecting a retracement up to this region area that is green, and then from that point, I will sell. So for gold, I am bearish on gold. I'm expecting the market to get up to that particular region and then drop from there. If you're entering any trade on gold, target to enter yourself that region. Already we're in a downtrend, so do not be tempted. Yes, some persons might be tempted to buy all the way up to that region, but I would prefer and suggest that you position yourself to sell from that region all the way down to below the low of yesterday. And then didn't answer our questions. All right, so someone is saying I didn't answer the question. What question exactly? Please send the question. Let me see. All right, so I'm seeing a question here. It's saying in Forest Factory News, please explain percentage. I don't know what this K means. What is K? And the actual, focus, and previous, and how this can affect the markets. What affects the price movements of US 30? All right, US 30, what affects the price movement of US 30? US 30 is affected by the price of stocks. So usually, when you see US 30 move, appreciate in value, is because the stock market is appreciating in price. It's because the stock market is appreciating in price. Now, what is DE30? Okay, you are asking for DE30. DE30 is a group of stocks in the European region, which is Germany and so on. So what that simply tells you is that those stocks, if you go to Google and type the composition of US 30, notice that it is made up of different companies. These companies are individual stocks, that their individual firms, that their stocks can be traded. So which means overall, whenever the economy is doing well within a particular area, the stock will begin to appreciate. Because when stocks appreciate, it means that companies are expanding. They are either expanding by way of making profits, or they are expanding, production and so on. So when companies are expanding, then stocks will begin to appreciate in value. The value of stocks will appreciate. And if the value of stocks appreciate in value, then DE30, which is a composition of 30 different stocks of these companies, also appreciates in value. That is what normally happens. That is what affects the movement of DE30. So you are looking at stocks. So if you want to gauge, whether DE30 will actually, be bullish or bearish, then you want to be looking at the individual stocks the composition of DE30. Now, if you go to Google and type the composition of DE30, it will give you the list, the most recent list of the 30 companies that makes up DE30. The same thing with US 100. So what you are seeing in these indices, they are a cumulative effect or cumulative movement in the stock market. Whenever you're trading them, then just know that you're looking at stock market. Whatever is happening in the stock market is what you see displayed on this instrument. All right, so someone is saying that I called regions without the price position. All right, so please, the areas I have called on the chart, I gave you the price region. Each particular point, look at it. So when a region is given like this, what I'm expecting is within this space, in that region, I'm expecting the market to drop. Which means whenever you are given a region, it means you must sell, like in this instance now, we are looking at gold. You are selling there, but your stop loss should be above that particular region. So within that area, be entering your trade and ensure that your stop loss is outside of that region. In my opinion, I think that is the best way to send trades, because with that, you now have an area you are looking at where you're replacing your stop loss instead of giving a specific price. All right, so what other question do we have? Okay, so how do we know what to trade when fundamental news comes out, either good or bad? All right, so when you want to trade, you will see the instruments the news will be affecting. Whenever the news drop, if you go to the Forex calendar, you will see the particular currency that news will affect. Now, depending on if that news is a base or quote. Now, if it's a quote, if the news happens to be a base, for instance, and then it turns out positive, then there's a high tendency that that particular, whatever instrument or whatever currency pair has that particular instrument as base, be positive. So the instrument you are trading or the instrument news will affect is shown on the news calendar. You will see it at the left-hand side where the currency will be displayed. So what other question do I have here? Whenever the dollar is affected, it affects US 30 and US 100. Then what currency will be affected? Affect changes in price of US 30. Now, currencies that will likely affect the DE30 is the pound and euro. Is the pound and euro, because these are stocks. The DE30 is made up of stocks within the European region. So the pound and the euro, these are the currencies that their movement will affect the DE30. So you may not need the dollar in DE30. The dollar affects currencies like US 30, and not that it affects them, but that what is happening within the United States, within the economy of the United States, affects US 100 and US 30. Now, when you're looking at DE30, then you're looking at the European region, you're looking at Britain particularly, and some other countries within Europe, like Germany, France, and so on and so forth. All right, during retracement on gold, can one place a buy? All right, so someone is asking, during retracement on gold, can somebody place a buy? Yes, you can place a buy, but I will not suggest placing a buy. Why? Because we are already in the downtrend. The trend on gold is down. So it is usually best to trade in the direction of the trend. So I will not recommend that you place a buy on gold, but you don't even know if you get there. It might just continue the movement to the downside from where it is. So, but your best option in a downtrend or in a trend like this is to sell rather than buying. All right, so my TP on gold is around 1.900. 1.900. My TP on gold around 1900 rather. 1900. And my stop loss on gold be around 1911. At around 1911, that would be my stop loss on gold. And at around 1900, that would be my TP. My entry price, like I said earlier, is within that particular space, that particular region. So let me just say my entry price will be at 1909.64. Within that area, that is where I'm looking at a step. All right, so which side do we use to check the news for today? We use Forex Factory, but I personally use what we call Trading Economics. So there's a website called Trading Economics that gives you detailed breakdown of the news. So if you want to see how each of these fundamentals will be broken down, then if you go to tradingeconomics.com, be able to get that. But the first news website we checked was Forex Factory. Second one we consulted was is Trading Economics. All right, so which other question do I have here? Which website? Okay, I think I've answered that. During retracement, answered that. All right, so I think I have done justice to the analysis for today. So at this point, if there are no further questions, now someone is asking, is this still good for a sell? On which instrument, please? On which instrument, please? On DE30. Okay, we didn't look at DE30. We only looked at US 100, gold, Euro USD, and some other instruments. All right, so I think we have passed our time. It's almost. So please, let's round up the class and hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you very much. thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's class. We will see you tomorrow for further analysis. Thank you very much.